Welcome everyone to another interview with the Meshwork. Today we have the honor to have with us John Robert Davies from the University of Manchester, ISSF Fellow and Group Leader. JR, welcome to the Meshwork.
Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. So just to start things off, do you want to introduce yourself, give us a little bit of your bio in academia and a little bit of your background as a person?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my name is JR. I from the UK. I did my undergraduate at Durham in biochemistry and molecular biology. And then I moved to London, and I was a research technician to begin with at UCL in the lab of Linda Partridge. And that's when I first started working with fruit flies. And then I continued that for my PhD at King's College London with Brian Stramer, where I continued working with Drosophila, but did a lot of live imaging. And I loved microscopy and fell in love with it as soon as I started making movies of developing embryos. And then stayed in London for my postdoc. I then joined the lab of Nick Tapon, first at the Cancer Research UK London Research Institute, but then that merged and became part of the Francis Crick Institute. So I was there day one. I've got my starters mug and bag as well. And then I was there at the Francis Crick for almost 8 years, long time, but with COVID and everything like that, things just got delayed. And I think Nick just loved having me in the lab, to be honest, didn't want me to go. But it was time for me to move. And then I started, moved to Manchester in 2022 when I started my group. And I've been here ever since, getting used to the rain.
We are all getting used to the rain, I think, right now.
Great, fantastic. Did you have different research files between your PhD and your postdoc? And can you say a little bit more about this journey?
Your research focus.
Research focus, did it switch? Yes and no, not massively. During my PhD, I was looking at single migrating cells and how they formed an embryonic pattern, and I was interested in kind of a repulsive dynamic that they had called contact inhibition of locomotion, and we found that it was a mechanically driven process, and I was interested in the mechanics of cell migration in single cells. And when I went into my postdoc, I continued that interest in mechanics, but I was interested in looking at it in terms of growth control. So there was a slight switch and transition there. I transferred from the Drosophila embryo to the pupae, which is a totally different model system. I mean, very brave choice. So it was kind of like a continuation, and I've always been interested in tissue mechanics. I've done a lot of laser ablation to kind of measure the forces that cells generate. And that has been kind of like, a staple throughout most of my academic journey so far. So it's always been a continuation, I would say, and not completely going off and doing something completely different. However, along the way, I've always wanted to teach myself new things. So my PhD, I learned Drosophila and that kind of work, but I realized very quickly working with engineers, coding is really important. So during my postdoc, I made a thing of like teaching myself coding and then implementing that and being able to do it. So
nice.
There's been a progression as the journey's gone on. And I continue that to this day, just slowly moving further and further away from where I started.
So right now you are working on metabolism, right?
Yeah, so the interest of the lab is understanding how, as cells generate these forces, especially during morphogenesis, where the cells also need to proliferate and grow. They need to have the resources to build up and grow and accumulate mass, but at the same time, they need to make ATP to generate these forces and transmit it across a tissue. And it's understanding how cells balance the nutrients that they have in order to do these different processes, how they interact with each other, and hopefully understand how maybe they, problems in one can influence the other, especially when you think about diseases such as, cancer, where hallmarks are often changes in the mechanics of a tissue, but then
Yeah.
also changes in its metabolism. So hopefully looking at, morphogenesis, we'll be able to understand some of the mechanisms that kind of link these things together and then get further understanding of kind of disease progression.
Okay. But so basically, from my understanding, yes, you have this constant of looking like forces and the biomechanical properties, but you did a little bit of a switch from like your postdoc to when you established your lab, because now you are a little bit more into the metabolical processes. How did you make that decision, basically?
Yeah, so it kind of came from reading some papers during my postdoc. So there was a few influential papers where they were looking at, applying forces to cells. So one was they were pulling on the cells with magnetic beads, and they found that the cells were, accumulating more, intaking more glucose and changing their metabolic profile, and kind of got me thinking about, like, we've been studying forces and we look at kind of like myosin and motor proteins and acts inside the skeleton, generating them, but actually they need the energy to do this, and how is that also linked in, especially during development. And the mechanics field, when I started in 2010 my PhD, it was still an emerging field. It was still quite new, but it has expanded and it's become huge. And so, you always have to find your kind of like niche or something that's a little bit different. So that's why I thought, I'm interested in this. I think it's a really important question to understand. And I don't know many people, studying it and looking at it. So this is something that, I feel excited about. I'll be the person who does it. So yeah.
Nice, very nice.
Great. So now the lab is dealing with a little bit of forces and a little bit of metabolism. And we see that you have a very unique name for the lab. Would you like to say a little bit more, the name and a little bit more about that?
So the lab is called the Hungry Tissue Lab, which is not one of your standard lab names. It came about basically, on Twitter. You need a good handle.
Exactly.
So what is a good handle that kind of explains what I'm interested in? I'm interested in tissues and metabolism. So it kind of came about through that, inspired a little bit by, I don't know if you know the board game Hungry Hippos. So the lab that I was in beforehand in my postdoc was into the hippo pathway. So we often joked about, metabolism in the hippo, hungry hippos. So it kind of emerged out of that, the Hungry Tissue Lab. Yes. And a lot of people, when they hear the name, they smirk a little bit. So.
But it's a nice story of how everything came to be.
Yeah. Pure social media.
Yeah, exactly. And it all comes down to Twitter at the end of the day.
It does, yes.
Amazing. So far from what we see from your academic journey, as you also described it, you have been basically in the UK.
Yeah.
So how come there was like no mobility, or even like, did you have any curiosity to go abroad, or that didn't come to be?
Yeah, so I mean, I remember undergraduate being told, if you want to get successful, you've got to do a PhD in the UK, but go to America and do a postdoc in America and then come back again. But I got married, I've got a wife, and we both did PhDs together. And then as they were ending, we were just looking for different jobs and looking at different things. And it just so happened that I got an offer in London, and she also got an offer in London, and we wanted to be together. There's nothing worse in academia than having to be the other side of the world from your partner or family and stuff. So very fortunate that I could stay in London. Though I would say it was for me, a very bold move from going from the south of the river to the north of the river. I mean, in London term, that's huge. That's massive.
Yeah,
so yeah, it's totally different, exotic place. But no, so that's why we stayed in London for that period. And then when it came to the end of my postdoc and I was looking for a place to establish my lab, I did look, curiosity abroad. You know, Barcelona looked very tempting, and you know, the idea of being by the beach with the mountains nearby sounded lovely. But we had kids, a family, my wife's work, so we just, you know, for family reasons, stayed in the UK. And I think, you know, being in the UK, it's a massive privilege to be able to go through your, you know, academic career, staying in the same country, being near family. A lot of countries, you don't have that opportunity, and it, you know, it's a shame. So yeah, so I have benefited from that, which has been good.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
Great. So let's talk a bit about the post-Brexit UK and research. Do you think that it's more difficult after Brexit to recruit European researchers in UK, or do people have second thoughts about joining?
So I don't think that there's second thoughts of people joining, and I think, you know, certainly, especially at the Francis Crick, that was a very international institute with people coming from all over the world. You know, in Manchester, it's maybe not everybody's top choice, you know, unless you love your football or rain. A lot of people, but we still have an awful lot of international people who come to the UK. I don't think Brexit per se changed things, but you know, recently the government started to kind of like crack down on migration, and there's been some issues with visas, especially with people with families, so it complicates things. We've just had a general election. We've got a new government, so let's see what happens going forward. But I think, like, a lot of people are attracted to the UK for science. We've got great universities, we've got great infrastructure, and you know, a lot of people who do come to the UK, you know, are able to establish their careers very successfully. So there's a lot of funding opportunities, you know, so I think it is a great place to do science, and it does attract an awful lot of people. Just more paperwork, but you know, what's a job or a hassle for one person is somebody else's career. So I mean, you can always look at it that way.
Yeah, and I mean, the UK just recently rejoined the Horizon funding scheme just last year, right? So I think maybe that was also like a good thing that happened, at least for the funding of researchers and labs. And of course, as academics, we have to deal with putting a lot of time and effort, you know, in grant writing, fellowship applications, and of course, rejections are also a commonplace. It's something that we have to deal with it and make peace sometimes. So how does it feel for you now that you are on this stage to write your starting grant for your lab?
I mean, yeah, it's nerve-wracking. There's a lot of moments of anxiety and worry, but then other moments of pure zen when you're just, what will be, will be. I think what I've been very fortunate having here in Manchester is a lot of people at the same stage. They've recruited a lot of young lecturers or young research fellows on similar kind of bridging grants to myself. And we've got a good community. So when you have those moments of like, it's getting on top of you, we go to the pub, have a drink, chat it out, you feel a lot better afterwards. When people get those rejections, we give each other a hug and say, come on, you've got this, you can carry on. And I think having that network, that community is just super important. And it's one wonderful thing about science is that, you know, everywhere that I've ever worked and people have a community, they're really in it together, supportive of each other. And I think that's just a privilege, and it helps us get through what can be a very daunting and scary task. But yeah, but it is, you know, it knocks you sometimes, but I'm an optimist. I just, you know, you've got to get back up and carry on again.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, try again, fail better.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Yeah. So with all those up and downs in academia, have you ever decide, or have you ever think about switching environments, for example, going to industry?
So never industry in terms of like biopharmaceutical. Like I worked at GSK for a year, and industry in that regard is not for me personally. But yeah, there's definitely been times. So near coming at the end of my postdoc, I was running out of funding time. I had nothing secured, and it was looking like I was going to be unemployed. And I was like, well, if it doesn't work out starting my lab, what am I going to do? And think about being a data scientist, or do I be a teacher? Or you start exploring lots of things, and you go away somewhere and you realize, actually, I'm just going to be a shepherd on the Isle of Arran, and just the simple life, grow my own vegetables. You go through all of those kind of thought processes. But every time I just, I love the job that I do. I love being curious. I love doing research. I love learning new things. And I think academia just gives you that. And I'm so thankful for all the funding and opportunities that I've had to be able to continue to do something that I love. Because when I do think about these other jobs, part of me kind of like cries or dies a little bit inside, thinking, oh no, it's not quite what I want to do. But I'm sure maybe you go and do something else, you actually realize there's a wonderful benefit to it, and you can walk away from all the kind of like insecurity and the constant rejections you get in academia. So yeah.
Yeah, so speaking again, like you mentioned before, that you have this sense of community in academia. So is this one of the things that you are looking for in a working environment in general? Like to have this sense of community, or what else would you say it's important for you?
Yeah, I think community is good, but I think it's having people around you who you can have fun with during it all. I think like being able to go to work and know that you're gonna have a laugh, you're gonna chat with people, you're gonna go through highs and lows with each other, but you're gonna do it supporting each other, and at the end of the day just having fun about it all and enjoying it and experiencing the thrill of science together is something important. And you sometimes go to labs and you see that's maybe not the culture, and people are maybe a little bit dour and a little bit quiet or whatever. But I've always been drawn to environments where people have had, you kind of feel an energy about them, where they're the highs and the lows, they let it be known, and you see them just smiling and laughing and having fun together. I think to me that is a real joy. And I mean, as I've been very fortunate in Manchester to get that. I had that during my postdoc experience and my PhD, so I've been very fortunate with it. I would not want to be in a dour, miserable lab, that's for sure.
Yeah, not in the doom and gloom, because
no.
yeah, you have to make the day.
Exactly, yeah. And it's it's the small things as well, joking about the fact that you make a graph in Prism and it looks like an abstract piece of art or something. Who knows what it is, but as long as you can have a little giggle about something, it's always a nice way to spend your day.
Yeah, for sure, exactly. This is all what it's about, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, so fun. It's really essential. But I was thinking about something else, about trust in work environments and how open we can be with science. So how essential is a trusting environment between institutes and colleagues for you?
Yeah, I think it's really essential, to be honest. I think if you're in an environment that you trust your colleagues, you're not paranoid that they're going to steal your data or your reagents, that you can trust them with you get an exciting result you don't know, you can go and talk to them, you just that makes it far more enjoyable. And then also as well with your employees, like knowing if they've got your back and supporting you, and having that trust that because academia is so uncertain, having that knowing that there's other people behind you who are supporting you, invested in you, wanting you to succeed, makes it so much more enjoyable and easier as well. I think if you go to institutes where you don't feel that level of trust, that support, I think those anxieties become bigger and amplified, and then you know, a lot of people then get burnout or can't, you know, deal with it. So I think it's really important to have those trusts. And I think you know, the places where you have that generally tend to be the more successful environments that, you know, people, because you work collaboratively, and it's always, you know, science is always done better if you work with other people, you know. You know, it's complex. Sometimes it's hard. You've got to think about it through, and having people to talk and discuss things and know that you can do it together, you know, you can accomplish far more than just doing it by yourself.
Yeah, and of course, we talked a little bit about the uncertainty in science, and maybe at points like anxiety and stuff like that. But if someone asked you, what is the one thing that science does great, you know, what would you say?
Well, that science does great in terms of compared to other kind of like jobs or industries, or
Yeah, like if you were to compare, I mean, you have been through industry and you are in academia and you
yeah.
have been through all the stages. So what would you say that, for example, science does better?
Yeah, I think two things. Flexibility is wonderful. I mean, I've got kids. Sometimes you've got to, you know, drop things and go. And like at the moment, we're coming up to the end of the year, and every week there's plays, concerts,
Yeah,
sports days, and I can go to all of those things. So that flexibility is great, which a lot of other industries don't have.
yeah.
But I think,
But
you know, the other
you
thing
got
is
the sacrifices.
exactly, yeah. But also freedom as well. Like, you know, the freedom that you have to, you know, drive your own projects, come up with your own ideas, do what interests you, instead of a client saying, we need you to do this. This is your job role. That's what you do. In academia, you can make it up. You can make up what your role is and what your job is, which is incredibly freeing. Like, obviously there's confined, you know, you might have some teaching, or but even the teaching, there's a lot of freedom to just come up with different ways of teaching. You know, people
Yeah.
are very bold in science and academia. They're free to, you know, take risks, and that's just not afforded in lots of other environments. And it's a real benefit of it, especially if you kind of like enjoy that freedom, which I'm a very anarchic person. I love freedom and trying different things and trying to break things. So yeah, I enjoy it. But if you're a very structured person, maybe it's not the career for
Maybe
you.
it's not for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you have another maybe level also of freedom compared to other industries, if you'd like, when you are in academia. And of course, you get to meet a lot of different people. As you said, for example, in the Crick Institute, you get people from all around the world. So this international environment can help you also like grow more as
Oh
a
yeah,
person.
it is like incredible. Like you know, I look at, you know, you go, you know, spend some time with some friends, you go to a conference and you're sitting there and you've got people from all over the world. But you're all interested in similar kind of things. Like, I find that incredible. Sometimes you've got people from, you know, Asia, you know, America, Europe, and you're all very interested in like one protein complex. I mean, it's just incredible how you know, science just captivates people. And the good thing is, like, you know, whilst you meet people from all across the world, because science is very international, it's very collaborative, people are always willing to share their cultures with you, you know, their cuisines, in jokes, all that kind of thing. So you just like, you learn so much about people, which is incredible.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you established your lab recently, and what would you say that it's the one thing that you learned from being the head of your lab?
Oh, the one thing, I suppose one thing is, and I suppose I always knew it, like people, it's one of those things, but when you actually then experience it, you realize it. And it's just how much goes on to make science happen. All of the admin, the financial stuff, the finding the funding, the, you know, talking and discussing with people, the, you know, making sure that you've got the facilities, the equipment, everything like that. There's just a huge amount of it. And when you're a PhD student or a postdoc, you kind of know that, and you do it. You've got to come up with solutions, and you've got to do some of the admin tasks and things like that. But when you start your own group, you just realize, like, oh, the book stops with me, so I've got to fill in everything and have everything else kind of working. And that is just an awful lot of work, the admin side of it. The other day I wanted to do some mini preps, and I mean, then just trying to order and get everything in and make sure that the equipment was there and stuff like that. You're like, when I was a postdoc, it was just there already and I could just go and do it. When you start your lab and you have to establish these things, you realize, oh, it's a bit more complicated than I thought. But yeah, no, so there is a lot of that kind of admin that goes on. So that's one thing I've definitely learned. I've also realized as well that when you become a PI, your focus changes. So when you're a postdoc or a PhD, you're thinking about techniques, you're thinking about resources or pieces of equipment that can help you. When you're a PI, it becomes so people focused. You're looking for those gems, those wonderful PhD students or postdocs that will drive a project and just do something incredible with it. And most discussions that PIs are having is just all about people and trying to attract the best people. And also, if you've got that good PhD or postdoc, you kind of show them around a little bit and say, look how amazing this person is. I'm so lucky. So yeah.
So it's like an administrator, a manager, an HR.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's all the jobs in one.
It is, yeah. You're kind of like your own little startup company.
Yeah. Was that in the job description? Or?
No, definitely not. No.
It's never in the pitch. But somehow it's always what you need to do.
Exactly.
Okay, so one last question for you to close this interview. What's one advice that you would give to someone that aims to be a group leader?
Yeah. So I would say networking, and I mean not in a horrible way, because that word has a lot of kind of like connotations, like a bit greasy kind of thing. But I mean, go and speak to people. Go when you go to conferences, get to know people, and speak to also big professors, people starting their labs. Just get out and chat to as many people as possible, because not only will you have interesting discussions and make new friends, but also that support is really essential. And when you have those networks and those communities that you can rely on when you go through this uncertainty or the difficulties, you've got people to draw upon that can help you. And sometimes it is difficult to wake up and think, oh, I've got to apply for that grant, I've just got a rejection, and you need those people there just to kind of like help push you up, kind of thing. And so networking at every level. So if you're a PhD student, try and network to find out maybe what labs you want to do a postdoc in. And if you're a postdoc, network with people at different institutions so that you get to know some of the institutions. And when you're applying, somebody who can tell you if it's good, what's going on, and also support your applications. And so, yeah, always have those networks. I think is a really important piece of advice that it's not something that anybody has told me, but I'm a naturally extroverted, chatty person. And I think it's been a massive benefit for me. And I know for some people it can be very daunting, especially if you're introverted and you don't feel confident enough going up to that big professor and chatting to them. But you don't have to do it through direct things. You can do it through emails, or just even send a direct message or like somebody tweet or something like that, and just say, I really like your research. And then just slowly start conversations at a more comfortable pace. But getting to know people is just really important. Yeah,
no, I think you're right. And I think it's one of the most important things, as you say, in your whole academic career, to advance and move forward and get the feedback and everything in between.
Yes, yeah.
Of course, yeah. So that was the interview for today. I hope that you had a great time with the Meshwork and with us.
I did indeed. Thank you very much for having me on the Meshwork and
Of
everything.
course, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being in our channel. Hope to see you soon in a conference, maybe. And of course, thanks everyone for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And see you in one of our next interviews. Bye. Okay, so thank you for the interview. Thank